Hi everybody, and welcome to this online safety presentation for parents and carers. What we're going to be doing today is spending a bit of time together looking at online safety, obviously, and part of that will be looking at the risks involved, but also hopefully providing parents and carers with lots of advice and strategies that you can all be using in order to keep our children safe when they're using the internet. We'll also be going through some strategies in order to equip you with the knowledge and skill set to report any concerns that you may have also when your children are using the internet. This presentation that we're going to be looking at has kindly been given to schools by these organisations, ChildNet International and UK Safer Internet Centre, and I'm hoping by the end of this presentation, it will give you plenty of information, things that maybe you weren't quite too sure on, and also some new advice and strategies that you can implement from home as well. So to start with, we're going to look at some of the risks involved. Now this page is interesting, isn't it? Because when you look at that, there's so much the children use the internet for, and it's important that we do recognise what the children love using the internet for and what they love doing online. And you can see just by this very small sample of images that you can see that the wide range of what they're going to be using it for. And that can be on a whole wide range of devices also. These children will be using their phones, their TVs, computers, laptops, iPads, tablets, so many things that will enable them to access the online world, which of course we have to say to the children is exciting and inspiring, because it is, and there's so much they can gain from having access to that online world. It provides them with so many opportunities, but it's also important, of course, that we therefore manage and minimize any associated risks that come with that. Now, what children need to be aware of course, is that when they're online, that has an impact on not just themselves, but also other people. And this phrase, digital footprint, and it's something that we introduced to the children quite early on, the idea of having a digital footprint, is because when they go on the internet, they're leaving their trail behind. They are on there, and what they could say or do has an impact not only on them, but also other people. And it's important they have that understanding that even though it's an online virtual world, it's still real. Because like the second point says, it's quite easy to feel that actually no one knows you're there, and people feel that actually sometimes children find it quite challenging to understand that even though you have this real world, but the online world is, even though it is separate, but it's also real, and they can't be totally anonymous online, and the information they put on there has an impact on them but also others. And that information therefore cannot be personal, and the risks involved around posting personal information, whether that's on social media pages or YouTube or some of the apps that the children may be using, we've got to make sure that they know the risks involved. And a little bit later on, we'll go through some of those apps and the age restrictions that should be in place to prevent these things happening. But of course, some children will be using them. And obviously, some online content won't be suitable for children. And of course, it will be harmful for them to be able to see that. And this is true for content accessed and viewed via social networks, online games, blogs and websites. And we've got to be able to teach the children that they've also got to have that ability to judge and consider whether something is reliable, whether it's something that they should be looking at, and whether actually the information they're getting from online could be biased. That's important as well. We have to train the children to seek information, research, data, news from reliable places. And of course, this last point at the bottom here, what children sometimes again don't realise is that actually copyright is a big thing, and there can be some legal consequences for downloading copyrighted content without the author's permission, whether that can be images or music or games, for example. And they've got to understand that actually it's not about just being told off, but there are legal consequences to such things. And then, of course, it's important that whilst the children realize that new friends online, they as they make these new friends, some people may not be as they say they are, and we've got to be very careful and showing the children how to do that very, very carefully. We don't want to tell children they can't communicate online, because of course that's a great tool of the internet to be able to communicate, but we've got to be able to tell them and teach the children what to do if somebody is concerning them. And again, a little bit later, we will talk a bit about some of the ways in which you can, and the children can report their concerns. But there's a few direct points of call, so points of contact, such as CEOP, which we'll come on to a bit later, but it's the Child Exploitation Online Protection Centre. Now, cyberbullying is bullying, and sometimes I think, you know, as the world has moved on, bullying has taken new shapes and forms. And cyberbullying is obviously bullying that takes place online. It's important that young people and children know that if they or their friends are victims of cyberbullying, what they can do and who they can go to and what are the consequences, and that it will be taken seriously. And cyberbullying can obviously take many different forms. It can be simply text messages to each other which are unkind. It can also be, like it says here, sharing of photographs or embarrassing photographs, or even excluding children or young people from groups or online chats. And this is something that obviously children, we really do make sure that they understand from quite an early age, but they need to understand that their online actions can just be as hurtful as what they say to someone face to face, or what they may say to someone or do to someone online can have just as much of an impact on somebody as it would if they said or did it in person in the playground. Now, sexting is obviously something that we all have to be concerned about. It's something where obviously we don't like to think primary age children will be doing sexting, and it's not something we need to worry about. However, it of course is. And there will be children, not necessarily just in our community, but across the UK and obviously and internationally, whereby there will be images, there will be messages, there will be inappropriate videos and pictures being shared. Now, as the name would suggest, sexting is taking and sharing nude or partially nude or sexually explicit images or videos. And if the person in the image is under 18, then it breaks the law. The Protection of Children Act states that it is illegal to create, distribute or possess any indecent images of a child, including self-generated images such as selfies. As it says, the police will take a common sense approach. They're not looking to criminalise any young people, but they have a duty of care. So if we have to report it, then they will investigate it. In the online world, content can get very far, very quickly. Young people need to realise that it's not as simple as one person sending a picture to one other and that's it. Unfortunately, you know, the online world, it's much bigger, lots of connections, and unfortunately things can share very quickly, unintentionally, and once it's out there, it's almost, well, it is impossible to take back. You can't delete it. Even if the person that they send it to deletes it, it's out there in the world, it's out there on the online world where someone else may also have a copy. And obviously that can lead to emotional and reputational consequences. And like I said just a bit earlier on, you know, sexting is a risk even for younger children. A child with access to a device who can take a photo and send it on may not understand the consequences and just think they're being funny. And this is something that, you know, I think all primary schools have experienced to some degree as well, unfortunately, because there are so many apps now that children unfortunately are using on their devices. I'm thinking of some specifics, but Snapchat, for example, is a particularly dangerous app for children because obviously it enables anyone to take a photo or a video and send it to a group of people, and then it disappears. However, that doesn't stop the other people that are receiving it from screenshotting it or saving a copy. And then once it's out there, it's out there. So even though it sounds something that wouldn't relate to primary age children, it does. If your children have a device, you know, they are at risk, albeit less than others, but it's still a risk. So looking at the advice, obviously advice on grooming, we need to discuss online friendships with the children. We need to make sure that they understand that a person they've never met face to face is still a stranger. So despite them thinking they have all the information about this new person they've met online, they're still a stranger because they've never actually met them in the flesh. And we need to discuss with the children what kinds of information they should avoid sharing with strangers. There are some really great resources which we will link when we send this to you all, and we share some age-appropriate videos with the children, usually two different ones, one for lower key stage 2 and one for upper key stage 2. So one for years 3 and 4 and another for years 5 and 6. And it just demonstrates in a child-friendly way the risks involved if they share too much information online. One video in particular, it shows the children in a obviously a dramatized version of having the front door wide open, and having all their photographs almost posted outside their house. And it interviews some school children, and it says, you know, would you put your would you leave your front door wide open? And they go, no, of course not, you know. And would you put your photographs out on the street? And they go, no, of course not. But then they ask the children, you know, do you have I don't know, a Facebook profile, for example? And they go, oh yes. And is it public? And oh yes. And do you have any privacy settings? And they go, no. So it's about trying to show the children that actually what they're doing online is kind of equivalent to those type of things that if it was happening in real life. So we need to ensure that they know that they can come to trusted adults if they have any worries or concerns about people they're talking to online. And this is where I said earlier on, if you have any suspicions whatsoever about someone who is in contact with your child, then you must report it to CEOP, and their contact details will come back to you later on, but you'll be shown how to report it later on in this presentation. But they will take it seriously again, and they will then look into it. So obviously you can call the police as well, but this is a particular online protection company that will look into the online side of things, but it's really important. Now, with cyberbullying, of course, we need to teach the importance of online respect and make sure that they know that obviously they can talk to any of us if they have those worries, but we need to ensure the children have the same level of respect for someone online as they would if they were talking to them face to face. I think that's what it boils down to. If they wouldn't say it to someone's face, then don't say it online or in a text or in a WhatsApp or on whatever app people are using. But it's about making sure they understand that if it's out there in the online world, it can still have the same impact on someone as if rather than if it was said in face to face as well. Now, if your child is a victim of this type of behaviour, please do save the evidence. I know it's tempting to sometimes want to delete all of the nasty comments, of course, because you don't want your child to see that. But it is important that you do save it. So screenshot things, take copies of everything, because obviously if it is looked into further by the police or CEOP, then they'll need to see what's been said. So do save the evidence, and of course then do report it to us in school as well, and also, like I said, the police if it is serious, and obviously then CEOP as well if it's online bullying. And do use the online tools to report and block the perpetrator. You know, the person that is doing the bullying, make sure they're blocked, make sure that you stop them from contacting your child and report them. And again, we'll come on to a little bit in a minute about how you can report people on some different apps. And as much as it might be sometimes that initial reaction, but maybe we need to consider about not denying the child then access to the device or a service, because actually they're the victims in this. So we don't want them to feel that they're being punished further. If they are the children, if they are the ones being bullied online, then even though of course it would temporarily stop them from being online bullied if they don't have the device, but it's also about balancing that with their emotional well-being, because they already probably don't feel great about themselves. So therefore, we don't want to make them feel worse by making them feel that we've punished them for being the victim. And of course, we need to make sure that the children, as hard as it may be in some circumstances, they don't retaliate, don't send nasty messages back, don't send inappropriate comments back, because obviously then it's better just to save what's been said by the perpetrator, report them, block them, keep the evidence, and then report it to the relevant people. Now with sexting, I appreciate this is a more challenging conversation to be having with the children, but it is important that you do discuss sexting with the children. Ensure that they know that once any kind of content gets out into the online world, it is difficult to get it back, almost impossible to ever get it back. And obviously the consequences can be very upsetting for the children and everybody involved, the families, friends, school, and everybody that obviously would go on to have the consequences of that. And make sure that they know they can, of course, talk to people. If something happens, what we don't want is for them to be too embarrassed, feeling ashamed of themselves, to feel they can't talk about it. Obviously, if something happens, then we have to address the safety risks of that, but it's also, it's essential they know that they can talk to people. We don't want them to be bottling up that that anxiety and those worries. We have to make sure they have that, they know they can talk to people. And with younger children, obviously if your child, or if they've got siblings that are a bit younger, it's just about making sure that we remind them about parts of their body which should be kept private. And again, I know infant school and in juniors as well, we talk about pants and being private, and your private areas are not for other people to see. And so therefore, we're just about reminding them about that. And of course, if you need some advice, then obviously contact the school and we can further support you if something is concerning you. But also please ensure that anything like this is of course reported to the police or CEOP or both. Even if you don't have any direct evidence, but you have suspicions about the involvement of an adult, or you think a child's being coerced into sexting, of course, please do. It's very serious and it must be reported. So an open and honest dialogue with your child is absolutely key. Talk to them about their internet use. Let them know that they can talk to you. Again, like I said, it's about making sure that they understand and they feel safe to know that they can talk to you about it, have the conversation. And you can see on here that ChildNet International, they've got some really good resources for parents if you're unsure or it's something that's a little bit challenging to have with your child, this conversation. There's some prompts and starter ideas for these types of conversations. If you are finding it quite a tricky topic to talk about, please do use this website, and there's plenty of resources there for you as well. And this is a great idea, again, on ChildNet International. Consider setting up a family agreement. So as a family, create an agreement, and you can see there are some resources there whereby you can create together. So you almost, as a group, as a family, you establish your boundaries and your expectations for using the internet as a family. Decide what you will and will not use it, and agree together, so that therefore you know what the boundaries are. And therefore you can also then put the consequences in place into this agreement. So the children are fully aware what you are expecting them to be using the internet for, what they can use it for, and if they do use it inappropriately, they also know what the consequence will be for that. And the internetmatters.org is another fantastic website. This is something that parents can use if you are unsure about how to set up any parental controls on your children's devices. So you can look at the filters and the individual devices. You can type it in, they've got the drop-down lists there, whether that's mobile networks or their phones or different devices, and it will give you some useful and helpful advice on how to block unwanted content. And And UK Safer Internet Centre, they provide some fantastic resources, again, plenty out there for everybody, just to help parents familiarise themselves with the different privacy settings and the safety settings for all of these different apps. Now, obviously, some of them won't be age appropriate, such as Facebook, but there will be other apps that will be age appropriate for the child, but you still may want to have that information about the apps to see what they are actually using, and how maybe you may want to enhance some of the safety filters on there, and that's absolutely fine, of course. And they've this organization have produced some fantastic guides which you can then use just for your own information. And this netaware.org UK with the NSPCC, this I think is a fantastic website, because what it does is if your child is using an app that you're not sure about, or if they're talking about, or if you hear your children or your child talking with their friends about a particular app or a new game, for example, you can type it into this website and it will give you a very basic but immediate overview on the type of risks that might be associated with a particular game. So, for example, whether it's got any sexual content, violent, bullying, suicide references or other, and it will put it into low, medium and high. So obviously if there are any high risks, then it wouldn't be appropriate for your child. And ideally they'd all be low. And if there was a medium risk, then you might want to look into it, or at least talk to your child about it, depending on what type of risk it was. So, of course, like we said at the beginning, we want to make sure that the children are enjoying their online learning and the apps and games and everything they're using the online world for, but it's about educating ourselves about what it is they're using it for. You might want to consider setting up a shared family email address, something that if you had a shared family email address and then they had all of their, if you have different devices between you all, then actually your child can then log into different apps and different services using that shared family email address. Because then what that will do is it will allow you to have oversight of what they're downloading. And it will be you'll be able to sort of tap into those different apps. You'll be able to discuss and see what they're using it for, because you've got a shared profile, so a shared account. And these points here, lead by example. Discuss the content that you share on social media, discuss the content that you download, discuss the content to some degree with your children that you might be downloading. So whether that's an app, or any games you may also play online, of course. Just talk about how you lead by example and how you would discuss the content, and maybe even if it's not appropriate for a young child to watch or see, but you tell them about that, because then you're teaching them that some things are not appropriate for you yet, and this is because of this reason. And that bit in bold, I think, is really important. Think before you post. It's hard, isn't it, for children, because they send something, like I said earlier, and they think it's out there and it's gone, but actually some things will stick with others and that will have impact on them. So just keep encouraging your children to always think before they post. Now we've talked about giving the children strategies to deal with the content that they don't want to see. And of course, sometimes the best of our abilities, you can have every filter, every block on your different devices and apps, but sometimes there will always just be something that will just get through whatever you put on there. And we have to be able to, for us as adults, know how we then are we equipped to then be able to deal with the content that they've seen and support the children. So whether that is having, like I said, those family agreements, you can have a section in there to say if something does happen that shouldn't happen, or if you see something that upsets you, this is what we do. We talk about it. We turn the device off. We put it away for a bit. We have a distraction. We look at some books or whatever they find interesting as well. You have a strategy in place so that if something does happen that perhaps shouldn't, talk to them. Have those strategies in place. Make sure that they are able to come and speak to you about it. Here are just some other useful resources which parents might want to have a look at. You can see they're just different ways in which giving you different resources that you can then use to have a look at some of the apps and games that the children will be playing potentially. And it just gives you a very basic overview about the type of content and risks involved with those different apps and games. And here are some contact numbers for a few different organisations. Some of them, of course, we will all be aware of. NSPCC at the top there, but also some other mental health advice. But also at the bottom, if there are any parenting or family support advice you need, obviously there is a helpline for you there. And of course, you can also contact the school. You know, if you need us to support in any way, let us know, and we will do our best to also support you with this. The saferinternet.org UK website has an advice centre, so plenty of information on their website, which you can also take resources from, as well as ChildNet International, plenty of frequently asked questions, hot topics, and like I said earlier, just giving you some resources, even if it's a template for an agreement, things like that that you might want to use and then adapt for your own families. So, of course, as much as we can make our internet safe for the children, there will be times when some things happen that perhaps they shouldn't see, or sometimes they come across inappropriate content, or if there is something that happens, if they're contacted by someone that causes them a cause for concern, then we need to be able to report this to the relevant people. So look out for the symbols, if it's a post, if it's a comment or a text or a something that's been uploaded. Often next to it there will be one of those symbols, whether it's a flag or dots or some lines. Usually that's the button that we would click on, and it would bring up some options. And you can see there's just a selection of different apps there, which obviously are used quite commonly by some children. And it just allows you to then be able to support the apps as well, of course, to then know what content needs to be deleted, or maybe there are people on these apps that need to be reported and then investigated as well. So fill in the forms with as much detail as possible, and please do send it, and also inform these different apps and platform safety teams, because of course we want you to call the police or the school and see up and make sure everyone's aware, but it's important that these companies and organizations and these apps also are aware, so that they can also keep regulating the content that is posted on their own platforms. Some other websites here where you can report harmful content. So an organisation that can help you report it. So if you're not sure, they can give you some further advice with the website at the bottom there. And then, like we said towards the beginning, we have CEOP, which is linked to the police. So an online protection for anything that causes concern, particularly around any sexual abuse or anything where it causes you a concern. You know, you can make a report, file it in, and then it will be investigated. So that's really important. And then again, we've got some other another website whereby you can please report anything that you see online that may be particularly linked with any child sexual abuse content. You know, we have a duty, all of us, to make sure that if anything we do see online, we report it to the relevant people. And so obviously we need to keep the conversation going. We need to not just have this as a one-off, it's making sure that it's something that we do regularly with the children, asking them what do they like most about the internet and why, understanding what do they use it for, what are their favourite apps, what are their favourite games, what do they use to keep in touch with people, what services do they use. And it's also about understanding what they use the internet for in order to be creative. You know, what do they create? What do they make from using these apps? often it will be a game, but lots of children will also create things, make things using these apps, and that's great as well. So it's about taking an interest. Start off on the positive note, get them hooked, get the children hooked in, so that you show that you have an interest, and then they're so much more likely to involve you in what they're doing online because you've shown an interest. And once you've got that way in, once you've started talking to the children about what they're using the internet for, that's when you can start slowly building in all of these different strategies and questions and advice that you've seen, and hopefully you'll gain from going on these various resources and websites. You know, ask the questions to the children. Have you got any tips for me on how I can be respectful online? How are you taught to be respectful online, whether that's in school or online? How does the internet make you feel? You know, when you're playing these games, does that make you feel differently? Do you enjoy it more because you're talking to people? What is it about this game that you enjoy so much? What could you do if someone online is making you feel upset or worried? So once they know you're interested, that's a great way of having the conversation. And then you can then offload your expertise and your strategies to the children so that they learn something from you as well. I like this one at the bottom. Help me. Can your child show you how to do something better, safe online? You know, ask them. Quite often the children nowadays are the experts when it comes to using technology and the internet. So ask them, how could I make my profile safer? They're taught so much in schools about online safety, and I'm sure, you know, lots of parents talk about online safety as well because of how important it is. So ask them, how do you think I can make my profile safer? So I hope that was useful. What we're going to be doing is placing this presentation on our website under the safeguarding section for online safety. We'll also send a link to the parents as well, of course, and we'll send a copy of some additional resources linked to certain apps, because there is an organisation that has made these fantastic posters when it has all of the age restrictions, the different settings for all the different apps that quite often children will be using online. So I'll link that to this pack so that you've got everything, and then you can sort of pick and choose what you want to use it for. So I hope that was useful. Thank you for spending some time to go through it with us. Of course, this is such an important topic. We need to make sure that the children have the skills to be able to use the online world, but in order for them to do it safely, obviously we need to do some homework ourselves, and we need to make sure that we have the right strategies in place, and the right knowledge so that we can then impart it to the children. So thank you again for joining us. We'll post it on the website, and if you've got any questions, or if there's any further information that you'd like us to send, just email the office, contact the school, and someone will be in touch with you shortly. Okay, thank you.